So from our episode, after our episode on Instagram, we put on a question window where people could kind of ask some follow-up questions after our episode, and we got a few. And I thought maybe you could see if you could give us a little bit more insight on some of these questions, if that's
Let's
okay.
do it. Yeah,
Okay, so one of the interesting questions that I found really interesting as well is how negative beliefs manifest in our actions.
hmm. So negative beliefs, I like to think of them as the deep underlying self-beliefs that we usually carry within ourselves, and they can come from many different places. They can come from our upbringing. They can be from the things we witnessed, we watched other people, but essentially it comes from the things we've learned over a long period of time, and then also messages that culturally we've received over a period, and they become more deeply ingrained in us. So let's just say you have a negative self-belief that you are a bad person. If you think that about yourself, and that's something that you may or may not even be aware of, but that's kind of deep down, that's what you think of yourself, then you are more likely than not to end up in situations where you end up confirming what you already believe about yourself.
Okay, so
You,
basically, you will start subconsciously do something that will then reaffirm to you that you are bad. Oh,
yeah, either that, or you end up acting in ways that kind of, let's say, if you think that you're a bad person, and with that mindset, you want to ask someone for a favor to help you out with something. The way you're gonna ask is gonna be in a very like awkward way, or you're gonna give off the vibe that you're doing something wrong. You
okay.
know? So
Yeah.
you end up signaling and giving cues that to the other person is gonna be like, what is going on? Like, why are they behaving in this way? And they might then feel weirdly because of the way that you are acting.
And sometimes when
And then
someone
you're like, oh, that's because I'm a bad person.
and sometimes it's when someone's acting awkward, you're like, is he trying to, scam me or something, or do something? And actually, that person is just feeling awkward in that moment. But people get the vibes that something's off or something, right?
E-
Even though,
Exactly, exactly. And some other self-beliefs, they could also have to do with things like, um, let's say, safety and danger. So if we are constantly anxious, it might be because we deep down have a fundamental belief that the world is a dangerous place and I'm not safe. So
Mhm.
I might go out driving and constantly be like super tense and be constantly looking out for bad things to happen. So I then cannot concentrate very well. And then I'm more likely to get into, a car accident or something like that. And you're like, see, it's very dangerous.
And where is that belief of world being dangerous forms? Is it in a childhood something happened to us, or our parents maybe said, "Be careful, be careful, be careful," because everything seems like so dangerous when you have those small kids. But I wonder if that forms the dangerous place as well in a way.
Yeah, definitely. I think the way you were allowed to or not allowed to have a sense of freedom and autonomy, and usually around teenage years, that's the time where we become a bit more independent. And if, for example, parents tend to be too restrictive or overly cautious and too, sheltering, that starts to, it potentially ingrain a belief. But it's also temperamental. Sometimes you have a kid that's, a bit slower to warm up and a bit more sensitive. And so if then we just go with it and we don't encourage that child to take risks and, make mistakes and fall, and then be there, support them through that, always knowing that there's always a loving, caretaking person there to kind of pick me up and make me feel better, then you start to feel like, taking risks is dangerous, or just having fun is dangerous. Something bad will happen if I'm having fun. You see that a lot where people are afraid to be happy, for example, and if they're too happy for too long, then that and it could also be superstition, you
Yeah,
know,
you
if
jinx it.
something.
Something's
Yes,
yeah.
yes,
Interesting.
yes,
That is
yeah.
so good. Yeah, because I often think that there is that fear of doing something, and a fear of failing as well. And then it's like when you kind of fail a few times, you're like, oh, actually, it wasn't that bad. You can, like, it's scary, but you can still do it. And it's still, you still can move on, right?
Exactly. So sometimes it's changing that self-belief, the negative self-belief from the inside out. And sometimes it's about doing things even though you feel the way you do or the way you think about yourself. And both can, in parallel start to impact each other, and you start to then build new experiences where you have it contradicts that negative belief and you start to feel better.
Yeah, and there's one sort of negative belief that I think almost everyone of us has, is that I'm not good enough. In many, and it kind of manifests in different ways. I've spoken to one of my friends, and then some might have, insecurities about how they look, some about their intelligence, some about just, in a relationship. So it's like at the end, it's like the same belief, but it feels like it can go different directions, right?
Our vulnerabilities can manifest in those areas that were probably kind of valued the most, or sometimes it could also be something that where the trauma is, and really negative experiences around that. So again, I mentioned adolescence earlier. So for especially both girls and boys, as they go into sexual development and their bodies changing, and the way that, for example, people dealt with those very natural changes and developments, that can really impact how they feel about themselves and their bodies. And also just, social media, the impact of that, and the impact of peer relationships, and how we watched our parents talk about their bodies or themselves. And for example, if the vulnerability was around finances and the family, and if money was always a problem, then that could then show up as, when we're grown-ups and adults, that becomes the area that we become most sensitive in. So it's the first area to kind of get activated when we feel bad about ourselves.
Yeah, interesting that you mentioned financial part of it, because we were talking with one of my friends as well, how, when you grow up and you don't have money, but it's almost like not having a money, but just seeing that others have more. And then when you grow older, you might have enough money, but you keep seeing others who have more. And it's this like this feeling of you can have everything you want and there will always be someone who has more, right? And
Yeah.
would that also be I'm not enough, or I'm not good enough for something?
Exactly, because that's a scarcity mindset, and we can carry that no matter how successful you become. You're always going to feel like it's not enough, and so I always say, kind of you need to know where the line is. And yes, you can still become successful and still have as much as you want, but is it going to fill your cup? Are you really going to feel the satisfaction of it? And people are afraid to like not be thirsty, and no, if I think I'm good enough, then that means I'm never going to try and I'm never going to succeed. It's actually completely the opposite way around. If you come from a place of wholeness and I am good as I am, you can actually accomplish more. You can do even better.
Yeah,
So it's
you're not
reversing that.
yeah, you're not like fear driven, but you're like purpose driven or something, right? Like where you kind of like inspired and you're doing it because you want to, instead of like proving to
That's
someone.
a really good way to put it. Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. I love it because I feel it. And I think there's, for a lot of us adults, you never feel like there's enough. And there, your mind just keeps going into not what others have to compare, but just how can I improve? And in a way, improving maybe is not the worst thing to improve your life. But yeah, where's that point where it's like, well, you're actually just doing it for your ego and not for your fulfillment?
Absolutely. And there's been studies done on this. I can't remember the exact numbers, but Up to a certain level of income, people tend to, the more you have, the happier you are. But after a certain point, doesn't matter if you end up having more, it can actually come with more problems and doesn't really give you happiness necessarily. So that's why purpose and values and knowing what is this all for is really, really important. And if I constantly come from a place of scarcity and not enoughness, then that's a dangerous demon to keep feeding. So
Yeah.
healing that would be really, really powerful and helpful for people usually. But also not forgetting that we're constantly sold things. We're constantly bombarded that, if you get this product and if you do this and if you sign up to this and if you're going to be, everything will be better.
Mm.
And we want a quick fix for stuff. And it's, it's a bit of a capitalist mindset. I have no issues with growth and a good kind of capitalism, but let's also not forget, like, what cost does it come with, and we're actually hurting, planet Earth, or at what cost,
Mm-hmm.
just because we want to feed our ego and because we want more and more and more.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Get that dopamine hit, right? Like get that pleasure, quick little pleasure. And then I wanted to ask you maybe just on the opposite side, for example, if someone is noticing that they have these emotions. I mean, I think they have to go to therapy, but maybe like, because sometimes you're like, well, I'm just a jealous person. And then it's like you go deeper and you're like, actually, it could be something else, right? Like, not, you're not jealous, but there's something about you that you're insecure and you're worried your loved one's going to go. What about jealousy? Where is there a link between jealousy and negative belief as well?
I always like to keep reminding myself this, and also talking to this with my clients. You are not your thoughts, you are not your feelings. It's also actually a bit of a kind of a Buddhist mindset, and the whole rise of mindfulness and detachment from our thoughts and emotions has actually, I think, helped a lot with this philosophy and idea. But ultimately, I think just recognizing you can have thoughts and beliefs, but what matters is what you do with them.
Mm-hmm.
And if I feel it, that means it's human. If you feel it, that means it's human. That means you're not alone in it. You're not the only one feeling those things. And I think it's just how much attention we give it. It's energy. Like, if you give it a lot of attention, you're going to keep filtering your life through that lens. And that's going to be what you keep getting.
Yeah.
But if you just notice it, okay, I'm having a moment, like this is just, something I'm feeling right now at this moment about this thing, and able to kind of relax it back and focus on the things that matter, focus on what you're doing, focus on your goals, focus on the next best thing that you have to focus on, then it loses its power. It kind of starts to calm down. Another way to think of it is, it's like, these are parts of you. This is not all of who you are. So you might have a part of you, or I might have a part of me that I definitely do, that can sometimes, and I like to give it as much detail as possible. Like, think of that part as a person. And if it was a person that was inside of you that was jealous, like, how old would she be? And what memories go with that? And what images go with that? And what does it remind you of? And when we give it a lot of shape and details, we're actually much better able to relate to it and help it, just like maybe you would help your child with it. So it's like, sometimes we just have to be like a adult and parent with those parts of us that
Yeah,
have those feelings.
that is so good. That's amazing. Let's go to the next question. I'm wondering if is there anything about negative beliefs that you didn't mention that's important for people? Because people who don't go to therapy, they oftentimes don't understand what negative belief means, because they think it's a thought. But and I think we talked about it in the episode. So the negative belief basically manifests in our actions on something. Is that, can we kind of conclude on there, or is there any other details that you should say?
It can manifest in actions. It can also manifest in feelings. It can manifest as sensations. A negative belief is actually a cluster of all of these together, and it's a deeply held self-belief. And it does include, if you just again think of it as parts, like it is a part of you. So like you have a part that says, no matter what you do, you're gonna fail, or no matter what you do, it's not good enough. Or you have a part of you that might say, you are you're ugly. It could be anything.
Mm.
So that part and that belief can be conscious, and sometimes it could be, we make it conscious when we put thoughts and feelings to it, right? But
Yeah.
sometimes it could be like, I'm doing all these things and I don't even know why I'm doing it, or why, someone might go on a million terrible dates, but they're choosing the wrong person over and over and over and over again, but not really aware of where it's coming from.
Mm.
And they might be repeating a pattern that is actually kind of um, propelled by this negative, deep held belief about themselves.
That is so interesting, because a lot of times you have to put these dots together, and you just feel like they're not, that your insecurities has nothing to do with how you choose partners, but then later you look, you're like, oh, they are like exactly the same, or they end up being exactly the same. And like, it might at the beginning feel like, well, they're two completely different people, but somehow maybe that chemistry between one person and the other eventually creates the same dynamic, right, that one is used to. That is
Yeah,
fascinating.
exactly.
And what about, just last question on this, can people feel health, like can they physically feel like their health is not good, and is that linked with potentially negative thoughts as well, for someone, for example, who has a illness and they feel helpless and stuck, and can that be, and I mean, I know it's like you have to go to doctor, you have to take medicine, but I'm wondering if sometimes the physical manifestations are also linked to beliefs of oneself.
Absolutely. I think it's all intertwined. Like mind and body are not separate, right? Everything is interconnected. Even if you think of something like a mental health disorder, like like a depression or an anxiety, it's all within the body. It's not just in the head. And the same goes for a physical manifestation of an illness. It is completely related to how you feel about yourself as well. So it doesn't mean that, like, if someone, for example, has cancer, they caused it. That's not what I mean. What I mean by that is how you deal with what's happened, this mutation in the cell and the overgrowth or whatever is happening in the body. How you deal with it will determine, can have a big impact on how your body will heal, because mind, body are one, and the nervous system, everything, your immune system, your metabolic function, your digestive system, it's all connected. Nothing is separate. So two people who maybe have very similar, let's say, they've done these, I can't remember the author who did it and who published this, but I remember when I was learning mindfulness, they were quoting a lot of studies around wound healing. So like two people who might have very similar wounds, like actual physical wounds from an injury or surgery, and the people that, for example, practice mindfulness and were able to have more um, more of an ability to be in the present and be and focus on their breath, and have the ability to not judge their feelings, not judge their sensations, and be in a way much more graceful and compassionate with themselves. They heal faster,
Wow.
and and I think this is kind of becoming much more common knowledge now that the way you perceive your physical experiences are very much connected. It's a bit tricky here because it's a new area, but there are
to
many things. So, but
sometimes they're not necessarily advertised as
one
such,
of
but
them
when you
is
call a clinic or center, you can ask, what is the fee? And if you don't have sliding scale, do you
believe
have
about
any
yourself that I
intern
can
or
handle it,
or student therapist that would offer a lower fee?
Yes,
That's a good.
you focus on
and the last
more,
not a question, but I'm a patient of
positive
Dr. A. She's
things
changed
of
my life,
what
and
you
I'm so
do
glad I
have
found her.
control over.
So
You are
let's
probably
end
then
on that
more
note.
likely to get up,
Thank
to
you.
move your
Good to see you,
body, to
Paula.
stretch,
Yeah,
to
thank you so
find
much for your time.
solutions, to
All right.
problem
Bye.
solve,
Bye.
to take a more active role in your well-being and your health, right?
Yeah.
So then you have also better health outcomes.
And I heard it somewhere as well that there are people who, like, when they face some difficulties, there are people who go into sort of their victim kind of role, and other people who don't associate themselves with victim just take that as a challenge, or like take that as, you know, a lesson, and they want to take it and they're gonna do something about it and move. And others sort of like take that as a, like, this life is treating them wrongly, and they can't do anything about it.
Yes.
Is that what
Yes.
you're saying? Yeah?
I'm a victim. That can be a negative belief. I'm a victim versus I am I have choices. There are things I can do.
Yeah. I love that. Okay, let's go with the next question.
That's 6 minutes, so let's get to the other question.
Yeah. How to try to not fix others. It comes from love, but for them, no, for them, it comes from love for them, but they perceive it as control. Um, yeah, can you talk about where is this trying to fix others comes from and what to do?
Yeah. So first of all, I would want to know more about this. It depends who and what situation, what context. Obviously, like, for example, if this is in the context of a relationship, for example, like a marriage, a lot of what the person is going through and what is happening with them will impact you. So it's not very helpful to just say, like, you're completely independent people and it doesn't matter what the other person does. And of course, you're going to try and you're going to insist and you're going to support. Another situation is if it's parents and children, or when it comes to even teens and trying to help, a struggling child, this.
Where is that line between being a supportive spouse or parent or a friend, and where is it that it goes beyond just a support but trying to do something for the other person, I guess?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because it could feel intrusive, or it could feel like intruding upon someone's maybe privacy or readiness, or I would say it just depends. It depends on the context, but my general, I think, rule of thumb is you can only help someone as far as they want to be helped. So, I think one of the biggest and most powerful thing we can do is hold space for people. If someone, community is important. We cannot just all pretend we're all completely operating in silo. Like, we need each other for survival. So, but there's a difference between being there and being supportive, and someone maybe asking you a question and supporting them or giving them resources, versus pushing someone to do something that maybe they're not ready to do.
Yeah, and I guess if someone's actually being open and saying, I feel like you're controlling me, that's already a good sign, like, straight in the face. But sometimes people don't want to say, because they think, oh, but it comes from a good place, so they don't want to upset the other person. Like, let's say a parent's trying to fix adult child, which I think sometimes happens, and then the child doesn't want to kind of upset them by saying, mind your own business. And then it kind of passive aggressiveness becomes, like, I think, a thing. At least I've absorbed it every now and then in different situations where people just don't directly say what they feel.
Yeah, you can. Someone could be super kind, but it could be perceived and received not well at all if it's not welcomed, right? Like unsolicited advice, you know. But I think one good thing to try at least is like, are you talking to, asking a question of like, do you talk to, are you talking to me because do you want me to listen, or would you like me to tell you what I think? You know, sometimes that can just kind of, and you can be like, no, I just want to vent right now. Please, no, I do not need advice. Everyone's telling me what I should think and do all the time. It's the last thing I want right now. Like, okay, deal, you know? And I think that could be a helpful way to filter it.
That's really good. Okay. And then the third one is, I don't have enough money to commit for a long-term therapy. What do I do? Yeah, what are because there's probably a lot of people who know that they need some help and support, but then obviously therapists actually are quite booked oftentimes. It's not easy to get on the, you have to wait on the wait list and all that. And sometimes it's obviously about the money as well. What would be maybe for you, what would you suggest people do, like first steps to start kind of towards therapy?
So therapy is expensive. I totally, agree with it. And it's expensive for a good reason. You're the people that pay for therapy for a good therapist is, and I think you asked that question, the difference between good therapy and bad therapy in our podcast too. But I think one of the things is that if it's a good therapist and they're well educated and have a good reputation and they're doing well, then the person is paying for a service that's not just based on that, because people think of like, it's 50 minutes, why is this so expensive? You're not just paying for, it's not just the 50 minutes. The therapy is a relationship, and it's like, mental real estate someone is occupying in the therapist's mind. And there's conceptualization, and there's clinical planning, and there's collaborating with other clinicians sometimes, or there's referring, and there's a lot that happens, not to mention years of education that someone has had to go through in order to be able to do it. So that's why it's expensive. Now, a lot of really good skilled therapists charge what they should be charging. And occasionally they would do sliding scales. So I think it's helpful to ask, do you offer a sliding scale? Which means a lot of therapists have a couple of slots that they may allocate for social justice reasons, for giving back to community, as a way to provide therapy to someone who may otherwise not be able to afford it. Another way is to join support groups. So doing group therapy is a much less expensive way of still accessing the knowledge and the expertise of a clinician without needing them one-on-one, which is more expensive. So there's, for example, DBT groups, and they tend to be quite affordable. There's parenting support groups, there's free support groups, and there's actually skill-based groups where people can learn skills and sometimes really address very difficult experiences as part of those. I'm trying to think what else there is. And the third one I would say is working with student therapists. So therapists who are in training tend to have senior supervisors. So sometimes I would say you're better off going with a new therapist who has a really good supervisor than working with a very experienced therapist who's super cheap.
Yeah.
That's not a good sign.
Yeah.
And you're better working with a new person because they're eager to learn. They've gone through the formal training, and they have someone who's helping and supporting them with their cases. And clinical supervision is like required and mandatory. I mean, I'm now 17 plus years practicing. I still seek consultation and supervision. So whenever you see people, even experienced therapists who are always staying up to date and have consultations, that's a good sign. And new therapists are required to do this as part of their requirements for licensing. And
would students be also listed on, like, how would you find, for example, student therapists? Are they are they a part of a clinic, or is that a different way to find them?